welcome to Get a Shift On. Really pleased you made it back. Here then is the third episode and my first real interview with someone else. I'm really pleased to welcome Kyle Stewart this week, who is a GP but also an entrepreneur who has done some amazing research with Watercress. I hope you enjoy the episode. It talks of his journey to entrepreneurship and how he manages and tackles the two sides of being a GP as well as an entrepreneur. Thanks so much for listening. Please do like and share, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome, Kyle, to Get a Shift On. Thank you for all those viewers, watchers, listeners. Really appreciate you. I'd like to introduce Dr Kyle Stewart, who is a GP, but also an entrepreneur. Kyle, thanks ever so much for coming along and really look forward to hearing your story. Do you want to give us a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a GP partner in a South Devon practice, 2 days a week, and then the other 3 days I run a company called Watercress Research, which we set up in 2019, but really started doing the underpinning work as far back as 2012. So it's been a long journey to get where we are now, but we're hopefully on the verge of getting some real commercial traction, and it'll be exciting to see what the next couple of years look like.
Excellent. And I know we've kind of talked about that Watercress, and we'll talk about it a little bit further down the line. I think that's super exciting. And who knew that Watercress could produce so many amazing results? But first of all, just to understand where you are today, how you got to where you are, where did your story begin? What was kind of the defining moment that made you look at leaving or possibly leaving medicine and being a GP?
Well, obviously, I mean, GP is an option for anyone who does medicine. So I went to medical school in 2004 to Birmingham University. And I think one of the key things for me is, as with most medical programs, often after the first or second year, you're given the option of doing the final year of medical sciences or another degree. So you end up with a dual qualification. So for me, after my second year at Birmingham, I then joined the final year of medical sciences and came out with both a medical sciences degree and a medical degree. So I did a 6-year program rather than 5. And really in that year, I got really interested just in biochemistry. So I was doing projects looking at low glucose and low oxygen in cells which mimicked the carotid body in the neck, to look at, which typically people think of as measuring blood pressure, but it can actually do some other bits and pieces. And I became quite interested in that. So when I qualified, I moved from Birmingham down to Torbay, and worked at Torbay Hospital to do my first couple of years as a junior doctor. And really, our story starts when I was on a ward round and was looking after a baby who was septic from infected nappy rash. And as is often the case, the juniors will present cases at weekly meetings, at teaching and things like that. So I went away and just looked at what causes nappy rash and found it was this enzyme called urease that some bacteria have, and it converts urea to ammonia. Ammonia damages the skin in various ways. And from then we got interested in plants, because plants have got natural inhibitors to this enzyme. And then that's when we started really the whole journey of research into, can we cure nappy rash with a plant? And we're nearly 13 years into that now. But really, it was around 2012. At that point, I was full-time junior doctor and was full-time until I believe it was the final year of my training to be a GP. So that will have been 2020, something like that, which is when I started to dedicate time, because we set up a company and it needed my time. Prior to that, it was just trying to squeeze in the research and the other bits alongside my medical studies.
And how did you manage that time shuffle? What did you do? Did you allot certain times? Did you have to work extra hours?
All of the above, yeah. So around that time, what happened was we discovered that some plants have got these compounds that can block a urease enzyme. So we thought, if we can block this enzyme in the skin or in nappies, then you don't make ammonia, you might not get nappy rash. And some plants have got a relationship with urease, watercress being one of them, where they want to hold on to urea in the soil to stop it hydrolyzing to ammonia, which they can't use. So they can use urea to make protein and grow. So we found that no one else had really tried to do this before. And I was introduced to who's now my co-founder, Paul Wynyard, a biochemist at Exeter University and a professor of experimental medicine there. And really, at the start, we're just doing this as a hobby because you never think anything's really going to take off. So what I would do is, if we had study afternoons, instead of going away and reading the sort of medical textbooks and things that we were meant to be doing, I'd go and meet Paul and we would plan experiments. And my study leave, I was a little bit cheeky maybe and was trying to convince people that looking at watercress was a useful way of spending my study leave, which most people didn't agree with. I got wrapped on the knuckles a bit for that one a couple of times. But really at the start, it was just about fitting it in. And then, of course, what happens is, we get further and further down the road of doing the work. We got a charitable grant from Torbay Medical Research Fund around 2013. From then, we had an award of £50,000. So it really meant it started to take a lot more of my time. So I was just trying to answer emails and take phone calls, as a junior doctor. Paul was doing it alongside his professorial work at the university. But then we applied for another grant to do more work and we were successful, and another grant and we were successful. And then by this point, we were at the stage of needing to set up a company. So we set up Watercress Research Ltd in 2019. So Paul and I co-founded that. And that's when I then went down to part-time in my medical studies. So I'd chosen to do general practice at that point. And I think a key point for me is that decision to do general practice. If I was just doing pure medicine, wouldn't have been my first choice. So I wanted to go and do what was at the time called ACCS, which is the Acute Care Core STEM, which consisted of intensive care, anaesthetics, acute medicine, and A&E.
Okay.
The problem with that is you probably every 6 months to a year have to rotate around a different hospital. And you'd have to go to Derriford Hospital in Plymouth, you have to go to Exeter, and then I'd have to maybe spend time in Bristol or one of the big other tertiary hospitals. And given we were looking at setting up a company, I couldn't do both. So the first real decision I made was, if I do general practice and I applied to Torbay, first of all, I know I could be out the other side of the training in 3 years, but also you stay in one locality for that training. So the big career choice for me is, do I see myself following a purely medical career path, and in which case do what you really want to do, which is ACCS, or do you want to do GP, come out with a qualification? And there is acute care stuff in GP, obviously, but then it gives you the opportunity to do some of the watercress work. And that's where I decided I'll do general practice and put my application in. It was successful and did it the first year full-time, and I think it was actually the second year I dropped down to part-time. And then to pay the bills, I would go to the mortuary before my shifts and do part 2 cremation forms. So this is where you take the cause of death certificates that doctors have signed off. You go through the notes, basically as a second pair of eyes and as a validator and a checker to make sure you agree with the cause of death. You speak to the doctor and you get paid for it. And that was how I then managed to start having weekdays doing the watercress work. The rest of the weekdays were doing my GP training, just about managing to pay bills and mortgages and things like that.
Yeah. And what a great way to do it. I guess that's kind of a sad way of earning that cash, but you have to do something to make up that extra bit that you're losing. And obviously you made a very conscious decision to change your direction of your career. Are you happy with the decision that you've made?
I am, absolutely. I mean, it's coming forward to where I am now. It's a really interesting split. So 2 days a week general practice, which has its own challenges, as I'm sure most people are aware of in GP land at present.
Sure.
But then switching over on the other days to, the biochemistry, the harvesting of watercress, processing and all the other bits, it makes it a lot more fun. And I think actually for me, I may really struggle just to do GP on its own. If I had to do that 3rd and 4th day in general practice, I'd probably start getting a little bit disheartened with it because it is tough out there at present. And actually, it's sometimes it can be a bit of a relief on those non-GP days when I'm doing the watercress work, because actually there's a different set of rewards you get from that, which I don't think I necessarily would get from general practice or from any medical specialty, to be honest. So I think for me, the split works. And I think, I would encourage other people who are maybe finding medicine or medical specialties a bit of a grind at the minute, just to consider, whether there is something else that they could do alongside, because there are a lot of transferable skills.
I think that's really interesting you bring that up, and I think sometimes it's not necessarily about just quitting and moving to something else, but that parallel work and that kind of just moving alongside, it's still relevant. It's still using those skills, the degrees, all the education that you've had. What kind of transferable skills are you using? And also, have you found skills that you didn't really know that you had?
So I think medicine and doing general practice has certainly helped. I mean, one of the key parts of general practice is communication skills. So we get taught, understand a person's what we call their ICE, their ideas, concerns, and expectations. And actually, it gives you a really good insight into how people feel about things, what their priorities are. And actually, we become very, very good at reading body language. So when I'm going into maybe some negotiations or discussions about contracts with third parties, it's not necessarily just what's on paper. You can really get involved in what makes them really tick. And that's not to be manipulative, but it's to make sure that you're answering what they're really interested in, and vice versa. And then also, clearly, there's stuff around pattern recognition. We have to pick up signs and symptoms. We have to be able to interpret data very quickly. So all these things are useful. Plus, we throughout our careers have had to assimilate an awful lot of medical knowledge. So learning new things about business, I think medics probably do pick up quicker because they're used to that quite rapid assimilation of huge amounts of knowledge.
Absolutely.
So you can learn the basics quite quickly of what you need to do to run a business. And the rest of it, you kind of pick up as you go along. So, when you start as a junior doctor on day one, on your first ward round, you're basically writing notes a lot of the time. You haven't got a clue what's going on. But
Thrown into
the key
deep
thing, yeah, but what you learn is you learn how to learn. You learn, are you a textbook person? Are you an experiential learner? You realise that actually you need to try and get yourself into theatre to learn your surgical skills. You need to try and stay late to, learn certain procedures or to see certain conditions or to be into a certain clinic. And otherwise, if you don't, someone else will. And when you're doing your training, unfortunately, there isn't always a consultant post for every trainee. So you really need to be trying to be at the top of your game. And I think that kind of slightly competitive nature, to be honest, is really useful in business because you want your company to succeed, and it's an extension of yourself at the end of the day.
And that drive, I think you're absolutely right. To have that drive to succeed, I think must come very naturally to a lot of medics, as you say. Do you think once you get to a certain point in your medical career and learning that you forget some of those skills that you've just talked about being on the ward round, learning how to learn? Do you think it just becomes part of a daily routine?
Well, I think it does, and I think you understand more about how you as a person like to learn. So at medical school, everyone does it the same way because you're sat in lectures and you're told go on a ward round and you have to follow the script basically, and you have a portfolio and everyone's got the same tick box exercises. Everyone will go about it a slightly different way, but then when you become a partner or a consultant, it's very much you do your own learning, and by that point you've kind of figured out how you learn. And I think the other important thing is you very quickly know what's important knowledge and what's less important knowledge. So half of, the very complicated neuroanatomy that I learned at medical school, I couldn't tell you it now. I don't need to know it for what I currently do day to day. So actually that I don't need to necessarily be able to recall it, but I know what I need to know. And I think that as medics, we do become very good at that, the idea of, you know what you need to know, and you don't know what you don't know but need to find out, or whatever the saying is. We basically, I think, become very good at understanding where our gaps are in our knowledge, and then actively being able to try and figure out how we fill those gaps.
And moving forward into business, really helpful. I can see how that really works when you're trying to speak to people and negotiate for funding and all those bits and pieces.
Yeah, well, some of the most challenging conversations I've had are people who are maybe on long-term opiates like morphine or other controlled medicines, and the guidance now is you need to try and bring those patients off them. If you've been on a medicine like that for 10, 15 years, it is a proper negotiation. And it's a bit of give and take, and I need to know what makes you tick, and I need to win the argument, because we have to get our prescribing down. So, there's all sorts of things that you learn on the job, what's worked before, what hasn't worked before. But those discussions really do set you up well for business discussions, I think.
People are people, whether they're sick people, or business people. We are all the same, and we tick in the same way. We need the same information. We need the same responses from people. So I think, I can really see how that works. Did you ever imagine yourself doing this? I don't necessarily mean Watercress, because that I would be really surprised if you imagined yourself with Watercress. But did you imagine yourself doing something else?
I did, and I've always been I've always had a kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I guess you'd call it. So prior to Watercress, I'd maybe tried another half a dozen things properly in terms of invention. So I had an invention for a new sharp spin lid to try and make sure needles lined up the same way, to stop needle stick injuries and to prevent overfilling. And I took my new design, which I paid myself to have prototyped,
Amazing,
to one of the big sharp spin manufacturers, and they said, lovely design. So what you're telling me is you can get 3 times as many needles into a bin. And I said, yes. And they said, so we'll sell 3 times fewer sharp spins. Yes. And they said, well, thanks very much. Good luck with that. We'll stick with our current design.
Yeah. Great.
And I had the same with and I had the same with a bedpan. I actually had a patent I submitted a patent with a company for a lidded bedpan. And the idea was, instead of just having a pulp bedpan, it came with a lid insert. So when you lifted it, you take the lid out, you put the bedpan on the commode, and then you can put the lid on. And actually, there was very good evidence that prevents aerosolization of pathogens, so you can reduce spread of infections, and actually means that when you're, walking it through a ward, you haven't just got open wee and poo, maybe with a couple of, paper towels on the top, which is kind of what happens at present. You've got a lid. Again, took it to a bedpan company, and they said, okay, so what you're saying is you're going to double the cost, because there's now going to be another pulp lid. And slightly tongue-in-cheek, they said, so if you reduce the rate of spread of infections, doesn't that mean less people get gastroenteritis, so less people need a bedpan, so we sell less? And I said, well, yeah, but it's not really the point. And they said, well, from a business perspective, it is the point. So these were really useful lessons to me. So I kind of, from that point, realized that if you just go to a company with an idea, regardless of whether you patent it or not, often if it's a really good idea, they don't want it because they've already cornered most of the market. And if they've cornered most of the market, why would they want to change what they do, change tooling, increase costs? So you're better off going to one of the up-and-coming companies who may want to do something as a bit of a disruptor or, as an innovator. But again, it's a difficult thing to get any company to take something on. So my lesson from doing all those was, if I'm going to do something, I probably have to do it myself and set it up from scratch, which is then what started to happen with the Watercress work. I couldn't just go to a company with an idea and say, oh, here's my idea and here's my patent. I really needed to get out there and start selling stuff and start, going shoulder to shoulder with people and saying, no, I'm here. I've got my idea. I've commercialized it, and I'm going to grow it and see where we go. And that's the journey that we've taken with the Watercress product.
I think that's really interesting, because you've obviously had those setbacks. Some people have knocked you down. You had great ideas. And I think some people would really struggle with that. And I'm sure there's a whole nother podcast and a whole nother series about funding, money, and the state of the NHS and financial bits and pieces. But you've obviously overcome that and still got that real resilience to push forward and do something that you are passionate about, and that entrepreneurial spirit. Do you think that's key? That resilience is key for people who want to make a change?
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting. I mean, I think for genuine entrepreneurs, you don't need to tell them that, because they will just get up and do it again anyway. It's just, if you're an entrepreneur, you are like that. And that's what I've always kind of been like. You have a knockback, you go, oh, that's a shame. But then you learn. Like, my lesson was, I can't just go to big companies anymore with an idea. So I need to do something myself and grow it. That was the big lesson for me. But certainly, that ability just to get knocked down and stand back up, dust yourself off, is really important. And, for me, you would look at all the things that I've tried, and, there's been other companies that I've tried as well, other inventions. I've maybe tried 20 things, 19 of which have failed. This one's worked. But if you said, well, actually, overall, 95% of things you touch don't work, you would say, well, yes, he's a failure. But you learn from them, you move on, and they don't play an active part in what you do going forward. You just keep learning until you hit that key one, and then you stick with it.
And what a great takeaway. I think so many people are worried about that failure and the fear of failing and think, if I fail, that's it, job done, I can't continue. Whereas you listen to any of the kind of big people that talk about career change, about entrepreneurship, failure is absolutely key. And if you look at some of the top business people, they will have all failed at some point. So I think that's a really, really interesting point, just to get up and get on with it again.
But I think the other thing, which sounds really odd, is you have to fail at things. Because if everything you touch turned to gold, how would you focus?
Absolutely.
You wouldn't get anything through to fruition, because something new would come along and you'd do something to it and it would get a bit better. So you'd end up having hundreds of projects that you would never, you would never take to finish because you'd be so distracted. So actually what failure does is says, okay, that whole side of things I'm not going to focus on now because I've failed 2 or 3 times there. I'm going to ignore that. Medical devices I'm going to completely ignore. I'm going to ignore trying to approach companies myself with a product because I know that they don't listen. Great, that's that written off. So what I'm left with is trying to take one of my own ideas forward myself. Fantastic. So I'll do that. Oh, I've had a bit of success in that one. Now I'll go forward. And within that success, you're at the next level and you fail 9 out of 10 times on anything you try and do there, whether it's raising money, whether it's coming up with a brand, coming up with whatever else. Through the Watercress journey we've had, loads of mistakes we've made. We've had some good luck, we've had some bad luck, but we've predominantly made mistakes because we're learning as we go. And to just get something right on the first attempt is vanishingly rare.
Fantastic. I think that's, yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit more then about the Watercress. What's the project? What's the most exciting part of that project?
Yeah, so we also have this interest in watercress having these compounds that block the urease enzyme. And we worked with York Biorenewable Development Centre to develop a method to get these inhibitors out in a liquid. And we managed to do that. So we had this nice urease inhibiting liquid. We tested it on all these bacteria which produce urease and found we could block ammonia. We also discovered that watercress has got the ability to mop up pre-existing ammonia. So when you chew watercress and you get that peppery taste, the pepperiness is a compound or a group of compounds called isothiocyanates, which are made as a stress response by the crushing up of cells. So it's a bit of a complicated chemistry. You have a group of compounds called glucosinolates in one part of the cell, an enzyme called myrosinase. You mash them all up when you chew it. It makes isothiocyanates. So watercress and the other brassica plants like rocket and wasabi and mustard seed all do this. And that's why they're all peppery. And the idea is it puts off things like cows and mammals from eating them because they don't like it. We've cultured watercress quite like that taste. But that compound mops up ammonia and is actually a very, very good anti-inflammatory. So the one that watercress specifically upregulates is called PEITC, or phenethyl isothiocyanate. And if you put PEITC into Google with cancer or inflammation or antibacterial, you'll see there's all sorts of work going on looking at the potential benefits of this compound. So we went to a company called LabSkin who make artificial skin through stem cell fibroblasts grown on like a collagen matrix. So it's an alternative to animal testing, and we proved it was non-toxic. And then we did some patch testing with ADS laboratories in Paynton, and we showed that our extract has a very, very good anti-inflammatory effect, and also that appears to be heightened if it's mixed into a cream, which also has an anti-inflammatory effect. So this is where we began to start thinking, well, nappy rash is a difficult market to get into because of MHRA regulation. So the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Authority will not see a plant extract as a medicine in the form that we have it. They
Okay.
would say you can't guarantee purity, and there's too many compounds to know what the specific mechanisms of action are. So we have to stay in the side of cosmetics. So to try and advertise something for nappy rash was quite hard. But what we wanted to do is actually see, well, if we made a range of cosmetic products and launched it, A, we just wanted to make some money, but B, we can see if we get any feedback and see if people naturally use these products in nappy rash or other things. And that's what we did. So in January 24, we launched the Prof and Doc products, Prof being Paul and me being the Doc. We set the website up. And last year we made, we had over 3,500 unique orders from the website, and we've had phenomenal positive response. So
That's
people
fantastic.
have been using our products on all sorts of different skin ailments and showing benefit. So it basically has given us confidence that there are these really interesting compounds in the watercress extract. And what we're doing now is going through a fundraise to allow us to redesign and rebrand kind of our packaging based on the reviews and the ratings that we've got, and hopefully start expanding into through distributors into other territories. So I think we've had about 300 reviews, and our average rating's 4.97 out of 5. So no adverse reactions, and beneficial in a range of conditions. And we have to, I have to again be careful saying that, because we aren't a medicine, but at the same time, it's important. We feel it's important, Paul and I, as academics and as scientists, to say there is something really interesting in this watercress product, and we are actively researching. We've published lots of papers, we've presented at lots of conferences, and ultimately our aim is to really drill down into the extract, find the compounds that are responsible for the majority of the activity, and see if we can synthesize those and follow a proper medicines and drug development pathway. Because this urease enzyme doesn't just cause nappy rash, responsible for the damage in an awful lot of different conditions. Struvite kidney stones, urease activity increases the pH, brings calcium and phosphate out of solution, you get struvite kidney stones.
Okay. Which I
Some
believe
of
is
the
meant to be
consequences
exceptionally painful. I hear more so than
horrible.
childbirth.
And the struvite ones are the ones that stay in the kidneys and often require surgery to remove. And there's a bug in the stomach called Helicobacter pylori that has this enzyme on its outer cell wall producing ammonia to buffer the stomach acid. Well, because it buries into the mucus layer of the stomach to try and hide away, it causes inflammation in the gut wall, and it's responsible for 2/3, if not more, of stomach cancers. Well, we've shown that we can block its activity. So we really do potentially have a new antibiotic. And if we can do that, that's potentially could have an effect in the 85 million cases of gastric cancer that there are worldwide every year. Really, really interesting future work. Yeah, so it's great. So right now it's cosmetics, but medicines discovery is certainly where we want to go. And our biorefinery, we designed it, built it, and commissioned it. And right now we take sort of 300 kilos of watercress at a time. It's got an efficiency of about 70%, so we make around 220, 230 litres of our extract, which we preserve on site, and then it's all made into final products, packaged and bottled from companies around the southwest of England.
It's amazing. 300 kilos of watercress seems an awful lot, considering you buy it in like 50-gram bags, maybe. That's quite a lot of watercress.
Well, the nice bit about it is, certainly, I think it's about 80 grams in a bag, but a nice story about us is we get our watercress from the Watercress Company in Dorchester. So they serve about 70% of the UK's watercress, and they're a brilliant company. We love working with them. But as with all fresh produce manufacturers, they need to overproduce in case there's a sudden surge in demand. So if Jamie Oliver goes and makes a watercress salad tonight, tomorrow everyone wants watercress. And it has to be cut and ready to go, otherwise they can't meet the demand in time, which means there is an excess that gets thrown away. Well, we can take that excess, which has a refrigerated shelf life of, say, 9 days, convert it into our extract, which, when preserved, has got a shelf life of 30 months, 2.5 years.
That's
and
amazing.
The two byproducts from our process are a fibre and a protein. And when we start getting into the stages of hopefully producing more watercress extract, we'll be able to commercialise that fibre and that protein separately as vegan fibre and protein, meaning we should be zero waste from an excess crop.
Wow, that's incredible. So you've got products, you've got cancer fighting possibly, and you've got like a
Potentially.
food stuff for vegans and protein alternative. That's wow, that's incredible, and all from watercress.
All from watercress, and right now it is really tough. So I don't take a wage from the watercress at the minute because everything's going into the marketing and the rebrand, and we need to raise more funds because you need money to market to sell. So unfortunately, it is expensive running a business. We need premises. We need to have, members of staff, and we're a very lean company. We've still got less than 2 full-time equivalents working for us, but they still need to be paid. So, it is still a really, really hard graft. But the light at the end of the tunnel is if we can get over the line with this funding round, we believe, be at a point where we can start becoming profitable. Then the profits can go back into the proper R&D work that we want to do, claim substantiation of the extract, claim substantiation with the products. And really, what I want to do is kind of engage the MHRA into what claims we can make. Because I'm a big believer that plants and fruits and other natural foods do have a medicinal impact. And I think we should be able to use slightly more punchy language than what we're restricted to as a cosmetic, as long as we have got the research and the evidence base to back it up. And that's what we'll be looking to do in the coming couple of years.
And I wish you all the luck with that. I think it sounds super exciting. You touched on finances there and not taking a wage. Obviously, if people are looking to change careers, one of the big fears that they have is that financial burden, the kind of affordability of being able to move careers. Most people will move career late 30s. They've already had a good chunk. They don't want to be doing what they're doing now in the next 20 years. They may have families, a mortgage, funds to finance holidays. Nobody wants to change their lifestyle. But if you're really passionate about leaving a career, changing a career, then you have to make that leap. How have you managed that financial change and that financial shift? What have you put in place? I know you said obviously you were signing the crematorium forms. What else have you managed to do, and how do you plan for that in the future?
Well, for me, general practice was a reason I went into being a GP, because it's expected that you don't do every single day in practice. Most people will do, say, 3 days a week. I'm currently doing 2. So for me to maximize the money in that I can get on my 2 days a week, partnership model is a thing. So I wanted to become a partner rather than a salaried doctor.
Right. Okay.
I didn't want to do a locum, it felt a little bit too unreliable. So I worked hard and was offered a partnership. And off that 2 days a week, that's enough for us to pay the mortgage and other bits and pieces. But you're right. We have to make cutbacks. I got married in December, and we've got no plans for a honeymoon. Can't afford it.
Well,
And
congratulations on
some,
that. But the honeymoon will come.
no, thank you.
When
But
you make it, then you can have the honeymoon.
well, this is it. And for some people, you have to decide what's more important. If it's, I want to have funds on a weekend and go on holidays, then take the full-time partnership, and do that. And for some people, good luck to them. Fantastic for them. They're happy doing it. For me, I've always just got an itch for something else, and I'd rather do this. I'm not going to call it a sacrifice now, because we still have a great time. But there are some things which we can't do now, which we would have been able to do if I was doing GP full time. And it's all about the risk. This might all come to nothing after 12 years. But if it did, tomorrow I would start the next one, because I've learned so much. And it would be a big kick in the teeth if this one after 12 years didn't work. But along the way, come with other little business ideas, other little things in the black book, other people that you've met, new networks that you're involved in. So there would be new opportunities in there. And I'm hopeful that at some point the business does take off, and then you can start enjoying it a little bit more. But I think for anyone setting out, it's about forecasting how you're going to be able to spend 3 days a week, 4 days a week, unpaid, while you're setting up a business. I mean, I did a good 18 months working every weekend out of hours for the local GP provider, going to the hospital, seeing people at home, triaging. So I was working 7 days a week. And that's when we were kind of saving up for the wedding, and we got into a house, so we needed to furnish it, and that was the option. And I think you just have to weigh up: are you willing to put that sort of effort in and do 18 months of 7 days a week? And for everyone's got a balance, everyone's got a threshold on what they can do. But ultimately, when you're starting up a business, you can't really expect to take a wage, particularly when you're raising funds. A lot of those funds have to go directly into, whether it's the R&D or into the marketing or the selling or whatever it might be. It's often hard to take a wage from funds. And what you don't want to do is have investors on board. You take a big wage and then you end up crippling the company. No one's going to want to invest back in that.
Absolutely. Dare I ask, how does your wife feel about what you're doing and the future plans? I'm going to assume she's on board for the most part.
For the most part, she's absolutely on board, and she's brilliant, to be honest. But even for me, there will come a time when we say, well, we're starting to get into our fees. How much longer do we keep saying it's going to work, it's going to work, it's going to work? I certainly wouldn't want to be 60s and 70s still plugging away after 20, 25 years saying I think it's going to work, because then actually, so even for me, I would say, well, what's the end game here? So, we always have our eyes on what does the next 18 months look like. We've obviously made an awful lot of progress on what we're doing in the last couple of years. We've built a biorefinery, we've launched a product, we've got really good market feedback. We know that the products work and the extract works. We've got our patents, and now hopefully in the next few weeks we'll find out about the investment, and then it should be hopefully a pretty exponential growth going forward. Everyone does have a limit. Mine's probably a little bit further down the line than most people, but there is a limit, and if it's not my limit, it's my wife's limit, and I have to listen to that limit.
Well, I don't want to say, but I'm sure that's absolutely right. We do what the wives say. But you're right. Everyone has that limit, and you can't go for 25, 30 years ever hopeful, wishing, because we've all seen people do that, and there is a real failure behind that. So there has to be that limit. Who else have you sought help from? Over help, I guess. Family, friends, etc. Other doctors that who's given you real support and encouragement to be able to make that move and say, do you know what, you're doing the right thing?
Well, it's a great question, and for us, I think in medicine we're quite. I felt quite fortunate in being part of the NHS England clinical entrepreneur pathway. So when I was starting to do the Watercress, this fellowship started up, and I applied, and I was on the first cohort who got accepted. And it's basically at the time, it was for doctors who had other ideas for businesses, and you didn't have to have a business up and running, but you kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit. And for me, that gave me a huge buzz, because down where we were in Devon, no one was trying to do anything else. Everyone was focused on the medical career pathway. And I had consultants saying to me, what are you doing with bedpans and sharp spin lids and all the rest of it? You need to be focusing on getting your exams out the way, joining a training program. And then I went to the NHS England entrepreneur pathway first group meeting in London, and just met loads of clinicians who were exactly the same as me, same age, doing the same sort of thing, having the same sort of struggles. And I'll be honest, that peer-to-peer support was absolutely invaluable, because I realised it's not just me trying to do this. There are loads of people. They may be more London-centric, and it's maybe seen as more common to do in London, but actually there are these people. So it's nice because you can bounce ideas off each other. You can see where everyone is in the journey. So that was really useful. And I guess the team that we've built. We've got a really good guy who's like our part-time CFO, and he's experienced in running businesses. So he's offered us fantastic counsel, as has the sort of businessman who put investment in right at the start after our charitable funds came in. They've been great, just to bounce ideas off, enter into networks. And then really for me, it's a case of, I need to know the landscape. So I go to conferences, I meet people, I sit and I listen to the podcasts, I do the extra work, and I build that network. And again, someone contacts you on LinkedIn and you speak to them and you think, that wasn't really useful, but they've offered to introduce me to someone else. You do that call. That wasn't really useful, but the third person down the line, you go, oh, wow, that's So, it's you sort of kissing a lot of frogs a lot of the time, but then you don't need to sort of really carry them on. You can almost say it's a bit like the failure thing. You don't really worry about those, but that person you do speak to, who you can have a real conversation with and learn something from, you contact. And now, I've got a regular group of people who they check in. How are you doing? How are things going? They've either got their own businesses and they've got an interest in watercress for various reasons, or they've got their own business and they're just reaching out and going, "Oh, Kyle, my business is struggling at the minute. How's yours? It's a bit tough out there, isn't it?" And I go, "Yeah, it's awful. It's really tough trying to sell stuff." But at least there's someone else out there who's
That's so
having the
important.
same sort of struggle.
Yeah, and that group peer-to-peer camaraderie is so important.
Yeah.
Because you can feel isolated. And I think when you come from a healthcare background, you can almost feel like you're abandoning the ship. You're meant to be a doctor, you're meant to be doing this. So to hear that there's other people in the same situation and feeling the same is so empowering, and that must be really, really nice. Especially say when people check in on you and say how's things, and you can compare notes, disappointments, good bits, celebrate the the good as well as the bad.
Yeah. And I think, and that's one of the things about being a junior doctor is it's all very structured what you do. So you're told this is your next step. I mentioned these portfolios before. They are tick box exercises. Do 10 of these, get someone to sign you off. Go to this many clinics. And you end up just completely blinkered, ignoring everything else and going through it. And actually, it's really hard to step outside and think for yourself sometimes and go, well, this is a completely different arena that I'm now in. It requires free thinking, and I don't know what's going to happen. And there isn't a tick box, there isn't a structure on what I need to do. I kind of just need to figure it out myself. And for some people, they won't like that because they're so used to that blinkered train track, we're going down this route, and they would find that really difficult. But for other people like me, it's a complete breath of fresh air. Because I don't like just having that train track, this is the route, and you're staying on it. I like saying, well, I'm just going to go off in that direction and just see what's over there. Certainly, if I hadn't found that peer support, I don't think I'd be doing this now, because you would just be consumed with people saying, what are you doing? And without success immediately, you start listening more and more to those people. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend to anyone starting out, find a network, find a group of entrepreneurial people, young business people, any groups for SMEs, and you'll just hear the same sorts of issues that you're going through. And it's really nice. It sounds horrible. It's really nice to hear other people struggling.
Of course.
Because you just realise it's not just you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so key. I think what you've touched on there is this journey is not for everybody. There are some people who, thank goodness, right, will be quite happy being doctors, GPs, etc. forever. I'm a radiographer by background, and thank goodness there are people that want to do that forever and not, move and do like we have done and become entrepreneurs. And you can feel very isolated, and the default position of so many others is, what are you doing? Don't be crazy. Why are you leaving this job? Why are you doing that? You've trained, you've done all of this, but it's not a feeling that is just you. I felt it, you felt it. The group of people, like you say, get together with those other people, like-minded, to understand that you are not alone in this. And I think that's really, really empowering.
And I think it's sort of making peace with it as well. So I'm actually really envious of the people who look down the train track and are happy to follow it, and they are really happy because they've got no interest in going off, and they live really happy lives and they're really satisfied. And I'm actually envious of those people because I can't get that. I don't know how they do that.
Would you swap?
And in the same, no, because I don't know how I do it. I don't know how I would get the pleasure from being train tracked into it. In the same way, people who are doing that look at me as a maverick and as someone who takes risks. And they would think I wouldn't be able to sleep at night because I'd be too anxious all the time. Like how are you doing a company that doesn't have any funding and you need to raise money, or the company collapses, or you don't know what you're doing tomorrow?
All those what ifs.
Yeah, all the what ifs they just don't like. But I think I'm hugely envious of people who enjoy that kind of train track, have a route and are happy to follow it. because they look really happy. And at the end of the day, that's what we all want. And I'm not saying this is for everyone, but I know there are a cohort of people out there who are on that train track who don't want to be. And they're the ones that I'm sort of interested in saying, well, this is kind of the way off. And as I said before, I think a lot of entrepreneurs will have gone to do it anyway, but a lot of people will still just need a bit of a nudge to say, well, go and have a try, go and explore something. You don't have to jump off the train just yet, but just go to a couple of meetings, meet a few people, and just see how it feels. And if it scares you, don't do it. And if you think, oh, this is good, just keep exploring it a little bit.
My next question to you was going to be, for those that want to possibly go down this route, what would be your advice to take that first step? Because so often it's that, I want to do it, I know I want to do it, this isn't right for me, I just don't know where to start. What is that first footstep that they should make?
So, I mean, the first thing is going into it with the mindset that you're probably not going to get anywhere for the first 6 months or so, and just accept it. But you're going to need to speak to an awful lot of people. And along that journey, there'll be a little light bulb moment, and you'll go, and whenever that light bulb moment comes in, just follow that. And then that'll branch out into a load of things which don't work. But somewhere in there will be another little light bulb moment. Follow that one, and then the same thing will happen. And you just kind of keep meandering around, following the little light bulb moments, and then it will start to narrow down what you're doing, and it will start to feel that there is a bit of a plan. And for some people will be thinking about, doing something because they've got the great idea, the next big business plan, and, they know what they want to do, and they just kind of need encouragement to go and do it. But there'll be others who just have an itch, and they don't have a business plan. They don't really know what it is they want to do, but they're just not happy doing it. And for those people, I'd say, for me, it was the NHS England Clinical Entrepreneur Fellowship. I've done a bit of work with Cambridge Judge Business School. They've got something called Enterprise Tech, which is for their PhD and master's students, where they get involved in writing summary documents for companies around business ideas. So they get involved in all sorts of different aspects. Just find something like that. Find a business school opening or an entrepreneurship sort of thing. Go along to it, and again, just meet as many people as you possibly can meet. Contact me. I'll speak to you for however long, and give you ideas and things. And then I think, if you do have that idea, it really is about planning how you're going to be able to execute it, because you're going to have to dedicate weekday time to it to make it happen. So how does that look? And how are you going to be able to do that?
That's great. I think that's such really, really good advice. But take some action and do something, I think, is the takeaway from...
Take some action, do, and that's exactly it. It just do something. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it works. But by virtue of you just doing something, then you'll just do more stuff. And if you can do stuff, and it doesn't matter if it fails, you'll be absolutely fine. Just keep doing stuff, because eventually, the dice will roll in your favour, and something will make sense, and then you're away.
Great. I'm going to put some links below to some of those, the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur website that you talked about, Cambridge, etc. Just tell us very briefly, what are the products that you have on the market, and how do we get hold of them?
Yeah, so the Prof and Doc products are at the website www.profanddoc.com. We have a cream which is going to be rebranded to a body lotion. So it's like a bit of a runnier moisturizer. We have a barrier cream, and instead of petrochemicals, we've used waxes and butters for that barrier function. We have a body spray, and we have a serum. So all the products have got really high concentrations of our watercress extract in, based on the science that we've done over the last 12, 13 years. Normally, a plant or flower extract is in at 0.5% in a cosmetic. Ours are in at least 10%. So at least 10% of all the products are the extract. The serum's basically 93% extract with a plant-based thickener and a preservative. So it's the most natural thing you can get on the market at present.
Amazing. Look, thank you so much for your time. I have one more question. Bit of a random one, bit of a curveball for you. But what movie or TV character would you be?
What movie? I mean, I would love to be The Rock. I mean, I think every kid grows up wanting to be Dwayne The Rock Johnson. So I'm going to stick with that.
Excellent, fantastic, and we can't take that away from you. Here's The Rock. Great, Kyle, thank you ever so much. I really appreciate your time
Pleasure.
and hope everybody has found it very useful.